19th in September, 1945, the train screeched to a halt in the middle of what looked like green emptiness. For days, the German soldiers had been packed into old boxcars like cattle, unsure of where they were being taken. Some thought it was another work camp. Others feared it was worse. Maybe even execution. After all, they were the enemy. The war was over. Germany had surrendered, and they were the ones left standing with hands raised in defeat. Among them was Otto Weber, a 24-year-old former radio operator from Dresden. He sat near the wooden door, eyes hollow, clothes clinging to his bony frame. His boots were worn down to the leather, and hunger had gnawed at his stomach for days. The British guards outside had barely spoken a word since the journey began. Cold stares, silence, and the occasional barked order were all they gave. Otto didn't expect kindness. He had seen what war did to people, to both sides. When the doors finally opened, bright daylight poured in. Otto squinted. The British soldiers ordered them out, but not with yelling or violence. It was stern, but strangely calm. As Otto stepped down, he expected to see fences, barbed wire, dogs, the familiar signs of imprisonment. But what stood before him was a large open field, and beyond that, rows of clean wooden huts, gardens, and even a small chapel. There was no shouting, no threat in the air. Just an eerie silence, and a breeze that carried the scent of something shocking. Freshly baked bread. "Move in line. You'll be assigned quarters and rations," a British officer said, clipboard in hand. Rations? Otto exchanged a confused glance with Jürgen, the medic who had treated wounded comrades in the trenches. Jürgen shrugged, just as lost. Inside the camp, the first thing Otto noticed was how clean everything was. The barracks were basic, but they had beds with blankets. Not straw, actual blankets. Toilets, showers, things he hadn't seen properly in over a year. Then came the real surprise. Lunch. Each prisoner was handed a tray. Boiled potatoes, a slice of meat, cabbage stew, a cup of tea. Otto stared at it, like it was a dream. He looked up at the British soldier handing out trays, a man maybe in his 30s, with a scar across his cheek. Their eyes met for a second. The soldier didn't sneer, didn't spit. He just nodded once and moved to the next man. Otto sat in stunned silence. Around him, others ate slowly, almost in disbelief. Some cried quietly. Some looked over their shoulders as if expecting the food to be snatched back. No one spoke much. The fear still lingered. Later that night, as the camp lights dimmed and the wind rustled through the hedges beyond the fence, Otto sat by the window of his assigned hut. He hadn't written a letter in months, but that night he borrowed a pencil and torn paper from a camp clerk and scribbled a note to his mother. "Mama, I am alive. The British have not beaten us. They are feeding us. I do not understand it, but it is true. I hope to see you again. Pray for me." He folded it neatly, unsure if it would ever reach her. But it didn't matter. Writing it made something shift in his chest. A little less fear, a little more hope. Otto still didn't trust the kindness. Not yet. He had seen too much to believe that enemies could just forgive. But maybe the world wasn't entirely broken. And maybe, just maybe, being a prisoner in the hands of the British was not the end, but the beginning of something unexpected. The next morning, Otto woke to a sound he hadn't heard in months. Birdsong, not gunfire, not screaming, not the low hum of airplanes in the sky, just birds and the soft rustle of leaves outside the small window beside his bed. For a few seconds, he thought he was home. He sat up slowly, blinking at the wooden ceiling above him. Then the memories returned. The train, the surrender, the British camp. His boots were by the door. Clean now. Someone must have brushed them. The air smelled of dew and something else. Soap. There was soap in the camp. Otto hadn't touched a bar of soap in weeks. "Wake up, you lazy bastard," Jurgen muttered from the next bed over, rubbing his eyes. "It's breakfast time, and I'm starving again." Otto gave a faint smile, his ribs visible beneath his thin shirt. "It still feels like a trick." "Maybe it is," Jurgen said, "but I'll eat every meal they give before they change their mind." Outside, the camp was already moving. Prisoners in gray uniforms shuffled into line, some still limping, some coughing, most of them still wary, like stray dogs unsure if the hand reaching for them held food or a beating. But again, there was no screaming, no rifles aimed at their heads, just British guards keeping watch with cold professionalism. The breakfast was porridge, a boiled egg, and half a slice of bread with butter. Real butter. Otto stared at it for a long time before taking a bite. It tasted like something from another life. After breakfast, the camp commandant, a tall man with a calm voice and a walking stick, addressed the prisoners in broken German. "You are prisoners, yes," he began, standing on a wooden crate near the center of the camp. "But you are also men. We will treat you as such, as long as you follow rules. No escape attempts, no violence. You will work, you will eat, you will live. We are not Nazis. We are not your friends either. But we are not animals, and we will not treat you like ones." There was a silence among the men. Some looked down. Others nodded slowly. It was Jurgen who leaned in and whispered to Otto, "This is not what I expected." Otto didn't reply. He was still watching the commandant, searching his face for signs of a lie. He saw none. The work began that day. Otto and a few others were assigned to help in the kitchen garden. Rows of vegetables, herbs, and even a few fruit trees that had been planted years before. A Scottish soldier named Corporal Adams supervised them. He spoke slowly, using simple English, sometimes pointing, sometimes miming. He didn't smile much, but he didn't scowl either. As Otto knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds, his hands remembered the movements. Before the war, he had helped his father in their family garden back in Dresden. Carrots, potatoes, tomatoes in summer. The same earth, the same smell. But this was England, and he was supposed to be the enemy. Corporal Adams walked by, glancing at Otto's work. Then, without a word, he handed him a small canteen of water. Otto hesitated, then took it with a nod. "Danke," he said. Adams just nodded back. Small things like that kept happening. That afternoon, a sick prisoner was taken to the infirmary and treated with real medicine. A guard helped carry him. No beating. No punishment. When the mail arrived, those with families received letters, read aloud by those who could. One man cried for half an hour after hearing his mother was alive. Otto couldn't understand it. He didn't trust it. And yet, he couldn't deny it either. Later, sitting on the edge of the barrack steps, Otto looked up at the setting sun. He remembered his commanding officer, back in the chaos of surrender, yelling that the British would torture them, that they'd be humiliated, starved, maybe even executed. "Don't let them take you alive," he had said, but here he was, alive, fed, treated, not welcomed, but not destroyed. "Maybe they're just fattening us up before they kill us," Jurgen joked, sitting beside him. Otto didn't laugh. He just stared at the orange sky. "If this is a trick," he said softly, "it's the kindest trick I've ever seen." Behind them, the camp lights flickered on. Somewhere, a harmonica played a sad tune. A few men sang quietly in German. One British guard listened without moving. The music wasn't forbidden, and in that moment, surrounded by fences but breathing free air, Otto felt something strange. Not freedom, not joy, not yet, but dignity. And that, after everything, felt like a miracle. A week passed. The routines of the camp settled into Otto's bones like old habits. Early roll call, simple meals, assigned work, and long evenings of silence broken only by quiet conversations or the occasional coughing fit. Despite the ever-present barbed wire and the distant watchtowers, there was something about this place that didn't feel like a prison. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't punishment either. It was survival. And in a way that Otto hadn't expected, it was even laced with small kindnesses. He'd begun helping Corporal Adams more regularly in the gardens. They didn't speak much, but there was a kind of understanding between them now. Otto didn't slack off, and Adams didn't treat him like dirt. Once, when a thorn had pierced Otto's palm while clearing out a rose bush, Adams had wordlessly taken his hand and pulled the splinter out with a pair of tweezers, then handed him a clean cloth to wrap it. That night, Otto had stared at the cloth longer than he should have. It was clean, soft, and it hadn't been thrown at him with disgust. It was offered with a quiet gesture of respect, or maybe just human decency, which, after what he'd seen on the Eastern Front, felt like the same thing. Then came Sunday. The prisoners were told there would be no work. Instead, they could rest, write letters, or attend the camp chapel, a modest wooden structure by the west fence. Otto hadn't stepped inside a church since the bombs destroyed the one in Dresden, but something pulled him there that morning. The chapel was quiet. A British chaplain in a clean brown coat gave a short sermon in English, but had a German translator beside him. The message was simple, about forgiveness, rebuilding, and the dignity of man. Otto sat in the back, eyes lowered, fingers twisting in his lap. Forgiveness, dignity, words that had no place in war. And yet here, in a camp meant to contain defeated enemies, those words floated in the air like prayers. After the service, tea was offered. Otto hesitated at first, but the chaplain smiled at him, a warm, genuine smile, and poured him a small cup himself. He sipped it slowly, as if afraid it would disappear. That afternoon, the prisoners were allowed an hour of free time outside the barracks. Otto and Jürgen sat on the grass near the edge of the garden, basking in the rare English sun. It was warm, comforting, almost unreal. "You think they really don't hate us?" Jürgen asked, chewing on a stalk of grass. Otto didn't answer immediately. He watched a group of prisoners playing cards nearby, a couple of them laughing over a joke. A British guard stood nearby, arms folded, but not interfering. "I think," Otto said finally, "they have every reason to hate us. But maybe they've seen too much war to keep holding on to it." Jürgen snorted. "Must be nice. If we'd won, we wouldn't be so generous." Otto didn't disagree. He thought about the cities they'd marched through, the flags they'd burned, the people they'd crushed under boots and orders. He thought about how the propaganda back home had described the British: weak, decadent, heartless. And yet here, in this quiet camp with tea and vegetables and hymn songs, none of that held true. That evening, something happened that shook Otto even deeper. A group of British school children had come to the edge of the camp fence, just outside, walking along a footpath with their teacher. It was clearly allowed, maybe part of some new post-war outreach. The children stared through the fence at the prisoners, whispering and pointing. Otto stood nearby, watching them silently. One small girl, maybe 6 years old, with messy blonde hair, looked directly at him and waved. A soft, innocent wave. Otto froze. He didn't wave back. He couldn't. He just stared at her, a lump forming in his throat. She didn't seem afraid, just curious. Then her teacher called her away, and she skipped off with the others. Otto turned around, walked back into his hut, and sat on his bunk. He didn't say a word for the rest of the night. The war had taken everything from him. His home, his youth, his belief in goodness. But in this strange place, in the land of his enemy, he was beginning to see something he thought had been lost forever. Not redemption. That was too big a word, but maybe, just maybe, a second chance. And for the first time in over a year, Otto Weber let himself believe that he might deserve one. By the third week in camp, Otto had stopped waking up in a panic. The nightmares still came, but less often. The ones where the sky rained fire over Dresden, where screaming civilians ran through rubble-strewn streets, where he saw his brother's torn body beneath a collapsed wall. But each time he awoke, gasping in the darkness, he'd see the wooden beams above his bunk, hear the low hum of voices in the other beds, and feel the solid ground beneath him. Not a trench, not a shelter, a place, real, strange, but safe. He began to notice small things, like how the British guards stopped calling them krauts under their breath, or how Corporal Adams sometimes brought back a second biscuit from the mess hall and accidentally left it near Otto's boots. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something closer to tolerance. And tolerance, in a world still bleeding, was almost holy. That morning, Otto had been assigned to help in the medical shed. The camp nurse, a soft-spoken older woman named Eleanor Harrow, needed help cleaning instruments and organizing the shelves. She didn't speak German, but her gestures were gentle, and she never looked at the prisoners like they were filth. As Otto scrubbed a tray near the window, a familiar face was carried in on a stretcher. Matthias, one of the younger prisoners. He'd collapsed from fever during kitchen duty. His eyes were glazed, skin pale, lips cracked. Eleanor rushed to his side, immediately checking his pulse and shouting something to the British medic, who came running with supplies. Otto stood frozen for a moment, watching her press a wet cloth to Matthias's forehead. The urgency in her voice, the way she wiped his mouth, the care in her movements. It stirred something strange in Otto's chest. Back home, German women had been taught to ignore enemy prisoners. Here, this British nurse was treating one like a son. "Go boil more water," she said. Pointing, Otto ran. That night, after Matthias had stabilized, Eleanor handed Otto a folded towel and nodded toward the cot where the boy lay sleeping. Otto approached slowly, then sat beside him. Matthias didn't wake, but his breathing had evened out. Otto placed the towel beside him, unsure what else to do. He wasn't a medic. He was just a man. Tired, confused, still waiting for the hatred that never seemed to come. "You care about him," Eleanor said softly behind him. Otto looked over his shoulder. He understood most of the words. "Enough. He is like a brother," he said. She nodded, her eyes kind but sad. "Too many brothers lost in this war." Otto didn't reply. What could he say? That he'd watched boys younger than Matthias die screaming in the snow outside Stalingrad? That he'd once cheered in the streets when Hitler marched past? That his hands had helped carry out a war he no longer believed in? Instead, he just looked down and whispered, "I didn't think your people would care." Eleanor sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "Some don't," she said, "but some of us remember what it means to be human." The words lingered long after she left the shed. That evening, a storm rolled in, fat, heavy rain pounding against the barrack roofs. Thunder growled across the sky like distant artillery. Most of the prisoners stayed inside, writing letters, talking quietly, or just staring at the floor. Jürgen had managed to fix a broken harmonica and now played a slow tune by the window. It was mournful but not hopeless. Otto sat across from him, turning over the day's events in his mind. "You're thinking too much," Jürgen said, not looking up. "I know," Otto muttered. "You're trying to understand why they don't hate us." Otto nodded. "Yes." Jürgen leaned back, wiping the harmonica with his sleeve. "Maybe they do. But they're choosing not to act on it. That's the difference between them and us, I think." Otto didn't answer. Outside, the storm faded to a drizzle. The camp lights flickered on again, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. Otto lay back on his bunk and stared at the ceiling, his hands folded over his chest. Maybe this was what peace looked like. Not celebration, not parades, but quiet rain, clean sheets, and people choosing to be kind when they didn't have to be. He closed his eyes and whispered to no one, "Please let it last." And for that one night, it did. The days rolled into each other like quiet waves, predictable, steady, and strangely comforting. It was October now. The leaves outside the camp had turned golden and brittle, fluttering down like ash from a calmer sky. The wind had lost its summer warmth, and a quiet chill had crept into the mornings. Otto didn't mind it. Cold he could handle. It was chaos he feared. Work was lighter now. The garden duties were replaced with maintenance tasks, cleaning tool sheds, repairing fences, and helping the camp clerk organize prisoner records. Otto's English had improved bit by bit, and the guards had begun to take notice. A few even addressed him by name. But something new had begun to bother him. Letters. Or, rather, the lack of them. Other prisoners had started to receive mail from home. Some wept over ink-stained notes from mothers or wives. A few received news of death or destruction, burned cities, lost siblings, vanished families. But even bad news was something. It meant someone still remembered them. Otto, on the other hand, had received nothing. Every time the mail was handed out, he watched quietly from the back, never stepping forward, never called. And every time he returned to his bunk a little more hollow. "I'm sure it's just slow," Jürgen offered one evening. "Maybe your family had to move." "Or maybe they didn't survive," Otto said without blinking. Jürgen fell silent. Otto didn't speak about Dresden. Not often, but the memory lived in him like a wound that refused to close. The night sky turning red, the church bells melting into fire, the screams that never ended. His last memory of his mother was her dragging him into the cellar, holding his head to her chest as the house shook above them. He'd never found her again. Now, sitting by the small fire outside the barracks, Otto stared at the flames and wondered if she'd ever even known he'd been captured, if she'd even had time to write before the world collapsed around her. The next day, as if the universe had heard his thoughts, a letter arrived. It wasn't from his mother. It was from Liselle, his older sister. The camp clerk called his name, and for a second Otto didn't move. Then he stepped forward, took the envelope with trembling hands, and returned to his bunk like a man carrying treasure. He opened it slowly, unfolding the fragile paper, eyes scanning every line as though afraid it might disappear before he could finish. Her handwriting was messy but unmistakable. The words were uneven, some smudged by what he guessed were tears. "Otto, if this reaches you, know that we are alive. Mama didn't survive the second raid. I'm sorry. I buried her myself. The house is gone. I've taken Anna and moved to a farm in Saxony. It's quiet here, but hard. Food is scarce. The Americans passed by once, but did nothing. We were afraid they'd hurt us, but they didn't. I think they just pitied us. I don't know what they told you over there, but here, everything is broken." The war didn't end. It just changed shape. People look at each other like enemies, even now. But I think about you every day. Anna misses her uncle. Stay alive. Come home if you can. If there's still a home to come to. Otto stared at the letter long after he finished reading it. His hands shook, but not from cold. She was alive. His niece was alive. But Mama! He folded the letter carefully and slid it under his pillow. For a long time he just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Jürgen said nothing, just sat nearby with a book in his lap, pretending not to watch. Later that night, Otto returned to the chapel. Not for service, just for silence. The door was open. A few candles burned at the altar. No guards inside. No chaplain. He knelt quietly in the back, head bowed, not sure if he was praying or just breathing in the peace. His chest ached. Not from grief. Not entirely. It was something else. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Longing, not just for his family, but for life, for meaning, for the kind of days that weren't spent fighting or running or fearing, the kind of days when you could sit by a fire and talk about the future like it actually existed. As he left the chapel, he looked up at the stars for the first time in months. They looked exactly the same as they had in Dresden. And yet, here, they seemed to promise something different. The frost came early that year. By mid-October, thin layers of ice formed on the camp windows in the morning. The vegetable gardens had been cleared and covered, and the prisoners now wore heavier coats, British issue, stiff and second-hand, but warmer than anything Otto had worn in months. Still, the cold crept in through the wooden walls, making nights long and sleep shallow, but Otto didn't mind it much. Something had shifted inside him since the letter arrived. Grief still clung to him, yes, but it had made room for something else. Purpose. Knowing Liesel and little Anna were alive gave him a reason to wake up each day. To work, to stay strong, to get home, if he ever could. One foggy morning, Corporal Adams handed Otto a folded piece of paper while they stood near the tool shed. "Command wants to know if you'd be willing to help with translation," he said, tapping his own chest. "You speak decent English now, better than most in here." Otto blinked in surprise. "Me," Adams nodded. "You're calm. You listen, and you don't give anyone trouble." Otto hesitated. "Why? Why would they trust me?" Adams shrugged. "Because we're not idiots. We know the war's over." That afternoon, Otto was brought to the administration office, his first time beyond the regular prisoner area. It felt surreal, walking beside a British sergeant not as a captured enemy, but almost like a guest. Inside, he was introduced to Major Caldwell, a gruff but intelligent-looking officer with silver hair and a scarred brow. Caldwell didn't shake Otto's hand, but he did speak clearly and without disdain. "We're processing a new group of prisoners next week," Caldwell said, fingers drumming the table. "Some from the north. The younger guards don't speak a word of German. We need someone calm to help with intake." Otto nodded slowly. "I can do it. You'll be watched, closely. But you help us, we'll note it. Might help when repatriation begins." The word hit Otto like a jolt. Repatriation. Return. Home. It didn't feel real. Back in the barracks, the others stared when he told them what had happened. Some were skeptical, muttering about betrayal, about collaboration. But Jürgen defended him without hesitation. "If helping them gets you home sooner," he said, "then do it. You're not betraying us, you're surviving." So Otto helped. The following week, he stood near the intake station as a group of about 30 new German prisoners arrived. Mud-streaked, pale, some barely old enough to shave. Most looked terrified. Some looked angry. A few had injuries that hadn't been treated in days. Otto translated every command calmly. He explained the rules, described the schedule, helped sort them into barracks. At first, they didn't look him in the eye. Some refused to speak. One man spit at his feet, muttering, Verräter, traitor. Otto didn't respond. But when one of the younger boys, no older than 17, began to cry quietly after being assigned to a separate bunk from his brother, Otto knelt beside him and said softly in German, "You're safe here. No one will harm you," the boy blinked, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "You don't know that," he muttered. Otto paused. "I didn't believe it either, at first. But give it time." That night, Otto couldn't sleep. He sat by the barracks window, watching the fog curl around the fences like ghostly fingers. He thought about the younger prisoners, how lost they looked, how much hate they still carried, and how much he had carried once too. He wondered how long it would take for them to see the British as men instead of monsters. Wondered how long it would take the British to see them as something more than what the swastika had made them. The next morning, while helping Eleanor sort supplies at the infirmary, she looked at him with her usual calm eyes and said, "They said you did well yesterday." Otto raised an eyebrow. "Did they also say someone called me a traitor?" She gave a faint smile. "Only means you're doing something right." Otto didn't smile back, but he didn't argue either. That afternoon, Major Caldwell called him in again. This time, not for work, but for news. "Prisoners will begin returning home soon," he said, scanning a list. "Priority goes to those with surviving families and no outstanding war crimes." Otto felt his throat tighten. "Your name is on the list." The paper was stamped. The process had begun. He would be going home, whatever was left of it. The camp looked different now, not physically. The fences still stood, the guards still patrolled, and the barracks still groaned with every cold gust of wind. But there was a change in the air, a strange, restless energy, like the prisoners had all caught the same whisper. "You might be going home soon." Some didn't believe it. Some were too afraid to hope. And some, like Otto, walked the thin line between doubt and desire, not daring to lean too far in either direction. Repatriation was still just a word, a promise made by the victors, and Otto knew better than most what war did to promises. Still, each morning he stood a little straighter. Each task he was given, he completed with quiet focus. He wanted to be ready, if the moment ever came. It was 2 weeks after Major Caldwell gave him the news that Otto received official confirmation. A British officer handed him a small form to sign. No ceremony, no speech. Just a line that said, "Confirmed for transfer. Weber, Otto. Repatriation approved." He stared at the paper like it might catch fire. "You'll be sent out with the next group," the officer said. "Could be days, could be a week. Depends on logistics." Otto signed the paper with shaking hands. That evening, the news spread through the camp like wildfire. Jürgen found him outside the barracks, standing in the light snowfall, just staring at the sky. "So," Jürgen said. "You're leaving?" Otto nodded slowly. Jürgen didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "You deserve it." "You do too," Otto said, almost ashamed. "Maybe," Jürgen replied. "But I don't have anyone waiting." "Not anymore." Otto lowered his eyes. "I didn't think I did either." They stood there in silence for a while, snow landing on their shoulders, melting into their coats. Finally, Jürgen muttered, "Don't forget this place." Otto looked at him, surprised. "I mean it," Jürgen said. "Don't go back and tell people the British starved us or beat us. Tell them the truth. Tell them we were treated better than we deserved." Otto nodded once. "I will." His final days in the camp were slow, but filled with moments he knew he'd carry with him forever. Eleanor gave him a small cloth pouch with dried lavender inside. "For your niece," she said. Corporal Adams, ever gruff, handed him an extra biscuit and muttered, "Don't die on the way back." Even the younger prisoners, many of whom had once looked at Otto with suspicion or disdain, now offered quiet nods or shook his hand. On the morning of departure, he stood near the camp gate with a small satchel of belongings and the letter from Liselle tucked tightly in his coat pocket. A truck waited just beyond the fence, engine rumbling in the cold. Major Caldwell approached one last time, offering no handshake, but holding out a folded sheet. "Your release documents," he said. "You'll pass through several checkpoints. Don't lose this." Otto took it. "Thank you, sir." Caldwell paused, then said, "What will you do when you get back?" Otto hesitated. "Find my sister. Rebuild, if that's still possible." The major nodded. "It is, slowly, but it is." Then he stepped back. The gate opened, and for the first time since May, Otto Weber walked out of the prison camp. The journey was long. Days through winding roads, past bombed-out towns and silent countryside. The other German prisoners on the truck were quiet, some anxious, some wide-eyed, none celebrating. No one knew what waited for them. The war was over, but in many ways it had just changed shape. They passed through checkpoints manned by Americans, French, and Soviet soldiers. Otto kept his head down, held his papers tight, answered questions calmly. He thought of Dresden often, of the chapel, of the girl who had waved through the fence, of Jürgen playing the harmonica in the fog, and of the day he stopped feeling like a prisoner and started feeling human again. It was just after sunset, when the truck stopped outside a quiet village in Saxony. The driver looked at Otto. "This is your stop." He climbed down slowly, the cold biting his face. The houses were small, humble, many still bearing the scars of war. Boarded windows, cracked bricks, shattered fences. But there were candles in the windows, smoke from chimneys, signs of life. He walked the dirt road with numb legs, heart thudding louder with every step. Then he saw her, standing outside a gate, bundled in a coat, holding a little girl's hand, Liselle and Anna, older now, but unmistakably Anna. Otto stopped. Frozen, Liselle took a step forward, hand trembling over her mouth. "Otto?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He just dropped his satchel and ran to her. They collided in an embrace that crushed the breath from his lungs, that erased the silence of months and the weight of everything that had come before. Anna stared up at him, unsure at first. Then she smiled. "You're real," she said. Otto knelt and hugged her, tears running down his face. "Yes," he whispered, "I'm real." Winter settled over Saxony with a soft, white silence. The farm Liselle had found was modest: 2 small rooms, a chicken coop, and a patch of land that refused to grow anything now that the frost had claimed it. But it had a roof, warmth, and beds that didn't creak like the prison bunks. To Otto, it felt like a palace. The first few nights, he barely slept. Not because of nightmares, though they still came, flashes of fire and rubble and the howl of sirens, but because of the overwhelming stillness. No boots marching, no shouted orders, no distant thunder of war, just the crackle of firewood, Anna's soft breathing, and Liselle's quiet humming as she tidied up whatever scraps the day had left behind. On the third night, Liselle sat across from him at the wooden table, nursing a chipped mug of weak tea. Otto stared at the letter he had brought with him, her own letter, the one that had kept him breathing inside the camp. "I wanted to believe you were alive," she said, her voice low, "but I didn't dare say it out loud." "Not in front of Anna. She remembered me," Otto whispered. "That's what saved me, that she remembered." Liselle looked down, her fingers tightening around the mug. "She still talks about that Christmas before the war," she said. "You built her that little toy horse out of firewood." Otto smiled faintly. "It broke in a week." "She didn't care," Liselle said. "She carried the head of it around for months." They both laughed. It wasn't the carefree kind. It was fragile, cracked at the edges, the kind of laugh people make when they've survived something they don't yet understand. Later that night, after Anna had gone to sleep, Lascelles sat with Otto by the fire and asked the question he'd been avoiding since he stepped off the truck. "What did they do to you, Otto?" He stared at the flames, the letter crumpled in his lap. "Nothing," he said. "That's what I can't stop thinking about. They didn't beat us. They didn't starve us. They gave us food, work, even books." Lascelles frowned. "The British?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not what people here are saying," she whispered. "Some say our men were tortured, shot, forced to live like animals." Otto shook his head slowly. "That's what I expected, what I prepared for, but they didn't treat us like monsters, not even when we believed we deserved it." Liesel studied his face. "And did you?" she asked. "Did you deserve it?" Otto didn't answer right away. He thought about the faces of Russian prisoners they'd marched past on the Eastern Front, about the civilians in Warsaw, about the charred buildings in Rotterdam, and the crying women in France, about how he had followed orders because it was easier than asking questions. "Yes," he said finally. "We did." Weeks passed. Otto began helping around the farm, fixing broken doors, mending the old barn roof, chopping wood. He was thin, still coughing now and then, but stronger every day. Anna would follow him like a shadow, asking endless questions about the camp, the war, the English people. "Were they giants?" she asked once. "Papa used to say they were 10 feet tall," Otto smiled. "No, just tall enough to hand you a cup of tea." Sometimes, in the quiet, he thought of Jürgen, whether he'd ever leave that camp, whether he'd find a family to return to. Otto had written him a letter, though he doubted it would ever reach him. Still, it helped to write it. The war had taken so much. Years, innocence, his mother. But now, there were chickens in the yard, a child's laughter in the wind, and the steady rhythm of rebuilding. One nail, one wall, one seed at a time. One morning, as snow began to fall lightly on the fields, Otto stepped outside and looked at the sky, pale, cold, but calm. He pulled Liessel's shawl tighter around his shoulders and whispered into the air, "Thank you." He didn't know who he was. Thanking maybe the British nurse who treated Matthias, maybe the corporal who slipped him a biscuit, maybe the little girl outside, the fence who had waved to him like he wasn't the enemy, maybe even God. Or maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd made it. He hadn't come back as a hero. He hadn't returned with glory or medals or pride, but he had come back. And that was enough.